If a police officer pulls you over, walks up to your window, and casually asks, "Do you have any weapons in the vehicle?" Most gun owners answer the same way. They smile, they try to be polite, and they say something like, "Yes, sir, I have a firearm, but I'm licensed." They think that honesty and politeness will make the encounter smoother, get them a warning instead of a ticket, and show that they're one of the good guys. That one sentence feels harmless. In reality, it can completely flip the legal situation against you. By answering that question directly, you may have just given the officer enough information to extend the stop, pull you out of the car, disarm you, and start looking for reasons to search your vehicle. You didn't just answer a question you may have handed over your Fourth Amendment protections on a silver platter. And once you give those up on the side of the road, it is almost impossible to get them back. In this video, I'm going to show you exactly how that question is used as a trap, what the law actually says about your duty to inform, and I'll give you word-for-word scripts you can memorize and use during a real traffic stop. By the end of this video, you will know exactly what to say and what not to say so you can stay safe, stay legal, and go home. Let's start with a simple truth. The officer is not your friend at that moment. Their job is not to protect your rights. Their job during a traffic stop is to investigate a possible violation and gather information. Every word that comes out of your mouth is potential evidence. And the question, "Do you have any weapons in the car?" is not small talk. It is an investigative question designed to open a door, both figuratively and sometimes literally. Before I give you the script, we need to clear up one of the most confusing parts of this whole topic, the so-called duty to inform. A lot of gun owners either don't know their state's rule, or they think there's one federal rule for everyone. That's wrong. The rules are different depending on where you are, and if you don't know your state's law, you can get in trouble either way, by saying too much or by not saying what the law requires. In some states, you have an explicit duty to inform an officer that you are carrying a firearm, either immediately upon contact or when asked. In those states, if you fail to notify properly, you can be charged with a separate crime, even if your carry permit and your possession of the firearm are otherwise legal. In other states, you have no duty to inform at all unless the officer specifically asks you a question, and even then, the law may not require you to volunteer anything about weapons in your car. So here's the first key point you need to understand. The script I'm about to give you assumes you are in a state that does not have an automatic duty to inform. If you are in a duty to inform the state, you must follow that law first. Breaking a duty to inform law on the side of the road just to protect your rights is not smart. You cannot win a legal argument with a traffic cop at 1 a.m. on the shoulder of the highway. That argument happens later, in court, through your lawyer. Now, with that in mind, let's talk about why answering that weapons question casually is so dangerous in non-duty states. Imagine you've been pulled over for speeding. On paper, this is a simple traffic infraction. The officer has the legal authority to stop you briefly, check your license, registration, and insurance, and either give you a warning or write a ticket. That's it. The Fourth Amendment limits how far that interaction can go. The stop has to remain tied to the reason for the stop, and they can't just go fishing for evidence of other crimes without some justification. But the moment you volunteer, "Yes, I have a gun in the glove box," the nature of the stop changes. From their perspective, this is no longer just a speeding stop. It is now an armed encounter. They will often claim officer safety as a basis to extend the encounter, order you out of the vehicle, separate you from the firearm, and pat you down. They may start asking follow-up questions about where the gun is, whether it's loaded, whether there are other firearms, and so on. Every answer you give feeds their suspicion that there might be more to investigate. Here is what many people don't realize. Officers are trained in how to ask questions in a way that seems harmless, but is legally very precise. "Do you have any weapons in the vehicle?" is not just a random question. It is a way to gather facts that might justify a search, or at least justify holding you longer. Once they know there's a firearm, they may start looking for reasons to look inside your car more closely. And if they see anything else in plain view, that can become another basis for further investigation. So what should you do instead? How do you stay calm, stay respectful, and protect your rights at the same time, especially when there is adrenaline pumping and blue lights flashing in your mirror? In a non-duty state, your goal is simple. You want to keep the encounter strictly limited to the reason for the stop. If it's about speeding, you want it to stay about speeding. You do not want it to become a gun investigation. And the best way to do that is to refuse to answer investigatory questions politely but firmly. Here is the first script I want you to memorize. The officer says, "Any weapons in the car?" You keep your hands visible on the wheel, you stay calm, and you say, "Officer, I'm not discussing my personal property. I'm just here to accept my citation." That line does several important things at once. First, it clearly but respectfully refuses to answer the question. You are not being aggressive, you are not being argumentative, and you are not lying. You're simply saying, "I'm not going to talk about that." Second, it reminds the officer of the true scope of the stop, a citation. You anchor the interaction back to what they're actually allowed to investigate without some additional legal basis. Now, what happens next? In many cases, if you deliver that line calmly and confidently, the officer will realize you're not going to volunteer extra information and will go back to running your license. But some officers will push. They may get irritated. They may say something like, "Why? Do you have something to hide?" Or, "If you don't answer, I'm going to assume you do." This is where a lot of people crack. They feel social pressure. They feel like they need to prove that they're a good citizen. And under that pressure, they cave and start talking. You cannot afford to do that. The law does not require you to prove your innocence during a roadside stop. You do not have to give up your rights because the officer is frustrated. So when they push, you switch to your second line. If the officer keeps pressing and asks again, "Do you have any weapons in the car?" Why won't you answer? You say, "Officer, I don't answer questions without a lawyer present. Am I free to go?" That line is incredibly powerful. It does two critical things. First, by saying you don't answer questions without a lawyer present, you are invoking your Fifth Amendment right to remain silent and your Sixth Amendment right to counsel. That is a clear legal boundary. Second, by asking, "Am I free to go?" you are forcing the officer to make a decision. Either they let you go or they detain you. If they detain you without sufficient legal grounds, that becomes a problem for them later in court. Notice something important. At no point in that script are you raising your voice or being disrespectful. You are not arguing about the law. You are not accusing the officer of anything. You are simply refusing to waive your rights. You're allowed to do that. The Constitution exists for exactly these kinds of situations. Now let's talk about the next trap, the so-called consent search. This one is extremely common. You've refused to answer questions. The officer is not happy about that, so they switch tactics. Instead of trying to get you to talk, they try to get your permission. It usually sounds something like this. "Well, if you don't have anything illegal, you don't mind if I take a quick look in the car, right?" Sometimes they'll say, "You wouldn't object to me checking the trunk, would you?" They say it casually, like it's no big deal, like they just want to glance around. And many people, again trying to look cooperative, say, "Sure, go ahead." If you take nothing else from this video, remember this: you should never, ever consent to a search of your vehicle. If an officer has the legal right to search your car without consent, they're going to do it whether you agree or not. If they are asking for your permission, it's because they do not clearly have that right yet, and they want you to give it to them voluntarily. The moment you say, "Okay," you have handed away one of your strongest legal protections. Here is your script for that situation. If the officer says, "You don't mind if I take a quick look, do you?" your answer is, "I do not consent to any searches." That's it. Short, clear, and absolutely unambiguous. You don't need to explain. You don't need to apologize. You don't need to add, "But I'm innocent," or "I swear there's nothing illegal." You simply state your refusal. Now, you might be wondering, what if they search my car anyway? And that's a fair question. Sometimes they will. Sometimes, even after you withhold consent, they will claim they smell something, or they'll bring out a canine unit and say the dog alerted, or they'll assert some other basis for a search. At that moment, on the side of the road, you are not going to be able to stop that. You are not going to win a physical or legal fight with an officer on the roadside. You should not try. But here is why your words still matter. When you clearly say, "I do not consent to any searches," that statement is captured on the officer's body-worn camera or dash cam. That recording may become evidence later in your favor. If your lawyer can show a judge that you explicitly refused consent and the officer searched anyway without a solid legal justification, there is a chance that anything they found can be suppressed, thrown out, because it was obtained in violation of your Fourth Amendment rights. If, on the other hand, you said, "Sure, go ahead and look," your lawyer has almost nothing to work with. So understand the pattern here. There are two main pressure points in a traffic stop for a gun owner: questions and consent. The question, "Do you have any weapons in the vehicle?" is designed to get you talking. The follow-up, "You don't mind if I take a quick look, right?" is designed to get your permission. Your job is not to argue law, not to be clever, not to out-debate the officer. Your job is to calmly and consistently refuse both. Refuse to answer and refuse to consent. Let's put it all together in a realistic scenario so you can hear how this actually sounds. You're driving home at night and you see lights in the mirror. You pull over safely. The officer approaches, asks for your license, registration, and proof of insurance. You provide those. Maybe they tell you, "I clocked you at 12 over the limit." You don't argue. You don't confess. You simply say something like, "Understood," and you let them do their job. Then they ask, "Any weapons in the car tonight?" You take a breath and respond, "Officer, I'm not discussing my personal property. I'm just here to accept my citation." The officer raises an eyebrow and says, "Why not? You got something to hide." You reply, "Officer, I don't answer questions without a lawyer present. Am I free to go?" Maybe they're annoyed. Maybe they go back to their car and run your information. Maybe they try one more time and say, "Look, if you don't have anything illegal, just let me take a quick look so we can both be on our way." You stay firm. "I do not consent to any searches." At this point, you have done exactly what you were supposed to do. You have remained respectful. You have complied with lawful commands like providing your documents, but you have refused to expand the scope of the stop with your own words. You have preserved your rights. If they let you go with a ticket, you drive away. If they detain you, search the car anyway, or escalate, you keep your mouth shut and you deal with it later with a lawyer in a courtroom where the law is actually applied and where their decisions can be challenged. There's one more mindset shift you have to make if you want this to work under pressure. You have to stop thinking of yourself as someone who needs to prove you're a good, law-abiding gun owner in the middle of a traffic stop. You are not there to win their approval. You are there to survive the encounter legally and physically and go home. Good people get charged with crimes every day because they talk too much. Prosecutors do not care that you were trying to be helpful. Juries never hear about all the respectful things you said. They hear the one or two statements that can be twisted against you. Silence is not guilt. Invoking your rights is not an admission that you've done something wrong. It is simply refusing to play a game that is rigged against you from the start. Once you understand that, it becomes much easier to stay disciplined with your words. To make this practical, I recommend you literally write these lines down and practice them out loud. Officer, I'm not discussing my personal property. I'm just here to accept my citation. Officer, I don't answer questions without a lawyer present. Am I free to go? I do not consent to any searches. Say them until they feel natural. The middle of a traffic stop is not the time to improvise. Under stress, you will default to what you've rehearsed. If you've rehearsed oversharing and trying to be overly cooperative, that's exactly what you'll do. If you've rehearsed these scripts, these words will come out instead. Traffic stops are just one of the situations where polite gun owners get themselves into legal trouble without even realizing it. Another big one is when officers show up at your front door, maybe late at night, maybe saying they just want to talk, maybe hinting that they've had a complaint or a report about you. The exact same principles apply there, but the rules about your home are different and, in some ways, even more important. In the next video, I'm going to walk you step by step through what to do if the police knock on your door, what you should say through that closed door, and how to avoid turning a conversation into an invitation for them to come inside and start looking around. If you are serious about staying safe, legal, and confident as a gun owner, you do not want to guess in that situation. For now, lock these 3 ideas in your mind. You don't have to answer incriminating questions, you don't have to consent to a search, and you never argue your case on the side of the road. You protect your rights in the moment, and you fight your case later with a lawyer.